Yes, starts is a very, very tricky one. You know, feel like everybody in the industry and in the field is pretty good at them. So, I mean, we're talking every little detail that has to really add up, right? So, when you end up picking a gate, first off, you want to also see what the angle is going into the first turn. I have been on both ends. I've been outside where I got a really good start, but somebody on the inside of me didn't want to turn, so I ended up being taken really wide, and which resulted in a start that wasn't that good. You know, I ended up being 6th or 7th, even though I came into the turn in like 2nd. So it's really turn dependent, but for the most part, we usually tend to go from the middle to the inside. You don't want to be too far out there simply because if you don't get a jump, then you're pretty much over with. Where if you're on the inside, you always have some kind of way of potentially sneaking around and actually putting yourself in a decent position. And then when it comes to being behind the gate, there's so many little things that you need to watch out for because 450s have a lot of power, and so you want to make sure that your body position is the way you train yourself to do. You know, there's a lot of different theories, and some people are further up, some people are leaning further forward, but I always make sure that I have a good squeeze on my legs and on the foot pegs, and then usually try and get an early shift, and I always have to focus really hard on the clutch release to not dump the clutch, because that ends up being the power too violent and your front will pop up, and then you have to double clutch it, and before you know it, your handlebar's behind anybody else's, and then you're not in a good start.
I don't like to, you know, be clicked into gear and like at the gate when the 5-second board goes over, just because I feel like when you focus too long, you're like too ready almost, you know, so I like to only focus for 2 seconds maximum on the gate.
So Supercross, we have those metal grates, so it's a little bit easier. He just kind of brushes it off, gets the dirt out of it, make sure the gate's all good. Outdoors is a little bit different. You're gonna wanna, obviously it's dirt, so you're gonna wanna get as much traction out of it as possible and kind of make it as flat as possible. Obviously, Supercross, we're flat and it's pretty basic every race. So I would say just try and get the grate clean and the gate clean.
Yeah, I have my little routine that I do every time just to kind of get into that like launch mode, like you would say. And yeah, I normally sit right at the front and push back, so then all the loose gear goes to the front, so there's no sliding. And I make sure I lock my legs and arms into place, and just make sure I squeeze tight and keep my head down over the front.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on where you're at in the first corner, depending on how chaotic it is. Because if you're out front, it's pretty easy. You kind of just take your own line. But if you're mid-pack, you're kind of guessing on wherever else it's going to go. So yeah, it just depends where you're at. If you're in the back, it's a little bit more dicey, kind of, like I said, guessing and trying to make the right decision. But out front, you control it, and you control your own destiny.
I feel like, if anything, it takes away from the rider's clutch feel, because the team is able to help with the rider. You know, let's say a rider doesn't have as good a clutch feel as another rider and they just want to dump it. The team's able to do stuff to the clutch to allow for that, whereas on dirt, you can't really dump it because you'll either get wheel spin or loop out. You know, the dirt's a little more sensitive to rider clutch feel, I personally think, but it hasn't, for me, it's not really changed a great deal. Just like at Salt Lake, we're using more RPMs, so